Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt and welcome to New Brick Workshop. There's a bit of an irony today. I want to talk to you about garden irrigation, but it's raining so hard outside I'm going to do the introduction here in the workshop. Now we've got two quite long borders with flowers and things in, and one's a shorter one with a little bit of fairly delicate hedging, I suppose. So I've come up with my solution, but there are lots of different ways of going about this. Now, I've bought the kit which I'm going to show you from a company in the UK called Water Irrigation. Now, they don't know I'm making this video. I paid the full price, and so it's going to come as a bit of a shock to them, really. Poor things. Anyway, this is the kit that I've bought, and hopefully, when the weather gets a bit better, you'll see me installing it. Now, I'm going to describe the kit from my garden tap outwards, and the first thing that I'm going to have is a timer, and this timer has two channels, 1, 2, and therefore there are two outlets, 1, 2. And this is, I think, fairly good value for money because it was less than £40, and it connects to your garden tap here, and then you connect one route controlled by one timer here and the other route controlled by this timer here. Now, this is a fairly simple thing. It needs a couple of batteries, but when you set it up for the run time and the frequency, you have to do that at the time of day you want it to take place. So if it's in the morning, 7 o'clock, at 7 o'clock in the morning for the very first day, you go out and set this, and then it will always do whatever you set it at that time of day and for that duration. Now, this is a pressure regulator. Now, I've got two of these because I've got two outlets on my timer. And this will reduce the pressure. Your mains pressure here in the UK can be quite high at times, but this will reduce it so that you get an even pressure along the whole of the dripper line, even if the dripper line is 50 metres or more in one span. Now, I need hose to go from here to take it to the beds, and so I bought some pretty good quality hose, and it won't kink, and hopefully it'll lay nice and flat so that if it's going across a pathway, there's less chance of someone tripping over it. And that's quite good quality stuff. It's braided, and this braiding stops it from kinking. Now, I'll talk about the connecting components shortly, but the main item that delivers the water to the plants along the borders is this, and it's called dripper line. Now, this is a type of plastic hose. It's fairly stiff, quite awkward to lay out, but it's not impossible, of course. And it's got little holes in it, and these are at 30 centimetre intervals, and these allow water to flow out gently. Now, you can get different types of dripper line, which will deliver a different amount of water per hole. And this particular one delivers 2 litres of water approximately every hour. And the added benefit of this particular type that I've got is that it can be buried because there's effectively a non-return valve. So dirt and fine sort of clay type stuff can't go back in through the holes of the dripper line. Well, it's finally stopped raining, thank goodness, but things are a little bit wet. I'm now going to show you the individual components and describe them to you in a little bit more detail. But before you know what components you want to get, you need to have a plan. And I've drawn out a rough plan of what I want, and on that plan I've identified which of these various components I need. Then I can do one order without having to pay postage or delivery twice. Anyway, here are the bits. I've already mentioned the two types of hose, the drip line and also the braided hose. You will need straight connectors similar to these, which can be used with one of these joining pieces to make a connection between one hose and another. And that gives you hose, hose, connector, connector, and that joining piece in between. Now, there are a range of nut lock connectors. These are compression connectors which are designed specifically for the drip line hose, and these are really good. This is a stop end. If I undo this, you can see in here there's a piece where the drip line hose would go over there, and then you would tighten this compression nut on there, and that then pushes the hose against that little green thing and makes a really good seal. That's an end stop, that's an elbow, and you can get straight connectors and various other things. Now you can buy ordinary connectors for the braided hose, the normal garden hose, from most garden outlets or Screwfix or wherever it might be. You're going to need some pegs to hold down the drip line to keep it in place. These are still a good idea even if you're burying the drip line, because it's got a mind of its own. It's quite stiff and it's quite difficult to get it to stay down. This is a tap connector. You may need some of these. The timers come with one of these for each of the two outlets. Now, as far as tools go, all I've needed to use is a pair of cutters like this. These are a pair of snips for cutting the hose to the right length, and these make a nice clean cut. You could probably use scissors perfectly well. I've got a flask with some pretty hot water in it, which is used to soften the end of the hose when you're making those connections. And I recommend a pair of rubber palmed gloves. When you're trying to tighten up those connectors, it's quite a good idea, particularly if it's a little bit wet outside. And I'll now demonstrate how to make a simple joint with the drip line hose. I've poured out some hot water from the flask, and we'll pretend this is my piece of drip line. It's a very short piece. You warm the end up that you're going to connect to the connector. Warm it up, take the connector, undo the nut, slide this on, then push this in. So that's all the way home up against the end of the green thing, and then screw that up really tight. And as I said, if you wear those rubber palms gloves, you'll find this bit really easy. Remember, with all of these connectors, you're only doing it hand tight. Don't use any spanners or anything, otherwise you'll over tighten it, either damage the pipe or damage the connector. Now, I made an assumption based on my interpretation of what are actually pretty good instructions on the Water Irrigation website. I made the assumption that I could use these connectors with the drip line. And it fits in, and this will tighten up. And I found when I did it the first time that I was getting a load of leaks. And I think actually this is probably not the right way to do it. But in the end, by tightening this up all the way so this nut met the orange flange there, I was able to make a sealed joint. So whether this is the right way of doing it with the drip line or not, I don't know. I know this is an elbow, but if you had a straight one of these, I haven't got a straight one, but I'm going to demonstrate it with an elbow. Just supposing that on this side we did our normal connection with the drip line hose. So that's on there like that. If you take the other end off, like so, and remove this, I think it's possible to now connect one of these tap connectors on there. I haven't tried it, but I just think it would work. So you've now got a really good connection to the drip line, and you now have here, hopefully, a really good connection to the lock nut connector. And then you'd use an ordinary connector like this to connect. And as I said, you can get straight ones of these, so it wouldn't be quite as clumsy looking as this is. So that's an alternate solution. I contacted Water Irrigation using their web form. They replied promptly within 3 days, which I think is pretty good, and they've confirmed that this is a good approach. Now, other types of connectors exist. This is a straight inline connector, and this is another type of straight inline connector, and this is a stop end. I cannot recommend any of these because I've seen each of this type fail at some point or another. So it's your choice if you want to use these. Now I'm going to start the installation from the tap and work onwards from there. And that means installing the timer. The first thing to do is put its batteries in. Now inside the bottom here is a little battery compartment thing, and it's pretty obvious which way round the batteries go. One in like that, and one in like that. Can you hear that noise? It does that when it is first given power. I'll just make sure everything's turned to off. Yep. So it made that noise when it first gets power. And the cover goes back on, and that's all ready to go. Now, these type of connectors, you should not use a spanner or any form of wrench to tighten them up. You should just tighten these by hand, and it will compress the little rubber seal, and that should be good enough. If when you connect it to the tap you get a small leak, just give it a little tighten, but do not use any form of tool to launch this around, because you'll end up damaging the washer and then you'll definitely get a leak. So in my case, I've got to remove this little gadget here, put that to one side, and this then screws on. Now you've got to watch that you don't cross thread this. That's perhaps easier said than done, but after a bit of practice you'll get quite good at it. That's nice and tight. That's tight. That's only finger tight. Now I'm just going to make sure everything's switched to off, 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 and off. So we're all in off. So if I turn the tap on, you'll get an initial little drip of water and then no more. Oh, no initial drip of water. So there we go. So the tap's on and nothing's shooting out the end. But I have got a small leak, and that's from here. Just give that an extra little tighten, and that stopped that little leak there. That's fine. And I'll check this later in the day. For now I'm going to turn the tap off, and we're going to start running the hose pipe from here to where we want the dripper to go. And for the hose end, I'm going to use one of these connectors which I got from Water Irrigation. But you can get other connectors. They're all pretty standard in the UK, and I'm sure Europe too. This one came from Screwfix. I've had that quite a long time. But I'm going to use the Water Irrigation ones here. First of all, slide the nut on, and then you want to introduce the hose over the little circular part in the middle. And you may have to take some care. I'll just do that a little bit. If you look at these little fingers, or whatever one might call them, teeth that stick out, you've got to make sure you don't trap those under the hose. So you push that in, and check it all round, and then take the nut, then hand tight only. You don't need to really go hard at it, and that's then perfect. With this timer come two of these little connectors. Now I've taken off this little cap from under here, and it's quite important to check whether you will need a pressure reducer, and I think in most cases you will. And this simply screws in the place where one of these was under here, like so, and again only hand tight. Then put this on the other end, which then allows you to connect the hose to there, and this part of the system is now complete. Now I've done one run already which goes in that direction. I'm doing a second run from this timer which goes in that direction, and I want to lay out the green hose from the timer to where the dripper hose will start, which is behind the camera now. Now, I very nearly put this connector on, but actually I want this pipe to run along the bottom of this wall, behind these pipes that stick out here, along to the tap. I also want it to go through this grating. So I'm going to thread that through here, remove the grating, thread the hose through the grating, put the grating back in, and then down the wall, which you see there. I'll then connect the connector at that end. I've got to remember my pressure reducing gadget, hand tight. I'll make my connection like so, and then I'll get my hose nice and tidy. So just here, my hose is going to do a right angle and go through this grating. So I'm just going to bring it down now. That now removes the hose from being a trip hazard as someone walks down here. But not especially tidy, I suppose, and it would have been nice to have had this hose completely hidden, maybe behind this wall. Now the advantage of getting this slightly better quality hose is that it does stay where you put it. And to trim this pipe, dead easy with the cutters, just like so. And the next stage is put a connector on this hose, which is pretty easy to do. That orange connector on the end of the dripper line as we fed it through is quite useful, so you could spot the end. But I've now cut this off, and what I'm going to do now is this will be the joining piece to take the hose onto another bit where I need irrigation, and that will be this connector and the connector which you can't quite see just here on the end of the hose. And this end will be a T, and my T will go like so, and I have the dripper hose which is already laid coming in on this side. This takes it to the hose there, and that side will go around a little bit of garden which is just beyond the shed, which you can't quite see. Now it's quite useful to use some warm water, and they show this in the various videos, just to warm up the end of the dripper hose because it's pretty stiff. It's pretty stiff. I've put the nut on already. That gets fed over now the little green connector, and now I can tighten this up like so. I'm wearing these gloves because they've got really good grip. It's not cold today, but I just want to make sure I've got really good grip. I think that should be pretty tight. That should be a good connection. I'm now going to make the connection from here to this bit of dripper hose, and then the next thing to do is, because this is loosely laid at the moment, is to then start pegging it all the way up to the far end. Then I can cut it at the right length to join on with the hose coming from the tap. And then after I've done that, I've got my reel of dripper hose, which I can then bring down here and use for these bits here and on the other side of the shed. So really, that's it in a nutshell. Very simple. Well, there you can see the dripper in action. I measure this and it's delivering almost 2 litres an hour, and which is what it claims. And you can't expect to be dead accurate, particularly when I've got 2 long runs coming off the same tap. So I can now bury this under the bark so it's not seen. Towards the back of the beds it doesn't matter because you can't see it anyway. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And it's pretty easy to peg down. The little plastic pegs are fine, although you've got to make sure you hit them squarely on the top, otherwise you can break the little flange off the lug which holds the hose. Well, there it is. Good job done. Many thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.